foreign predatory parasitic corporations are replacing our natural environment with an industrial landscape of wind turbines. One Nation will stand against sending children down a path of drug dependency and body mutilation to appease the gender cult. Leave our kids alone. The Trusted Digital Identity Bill is a global surveillance and control mechanism that profit-hungry corporations and power-mad politicians drafted and crafted. One Nation opposes this inhuman dystopian future that the United Nations promotes as the Great Reset, and we condemn this Parliament for signing on to it. I called for Australia to reject the World Economic Forum's Great Reset and instead mount a Great Resist. Just like the koalas being euthanized to make way for wind turbines or damaged solar panels leaking toxic heavy metals into waterways, the United Nations net zero plan again involves killing the environment to save it. I've been speaking about the fear, the oppression and the inhuman cruelty of our COVID response since July 2020. I promised to hound down those responsible, and I will continue relentlessly to keep that promise. You're about to be live with me, Senator Malcolm Roberts. Well, g'day. It's Friday again already. And we've got a special treat. Again, we had one last week with Craig Kelly. Well, look, we had so much fun together. He called us up yesterday. I was driving home from listening to 3 different groups up in the Sunshine Coast. And Craig came on the phone and he raised 5 important points. And I said, look, how about you jump on tomorrow and we'll discuss those 5 points. Before bringing in Craig, I just want to say that I'll be in Cairns tomorrow evening at a forum at Ridges starting at 6 p.m. Ridges, 6 p.m. in Cairns. Tomorrow we'll be discussing some issues that are facing all Queenslanders and that are concerning Queenslanders. We'll also be listening to people. We'll also be talking about digital identity and giving that people in Cairns the details on that. And we'll be introducing some candidates for One Nation candidates for the Queensland state election later this year. Fabulous candidates. And we'll also be having a Q&A. And as I said, we'll be mingling and listening to people. I'll be back up in North Queensland, although the people in far North Queensland don't reckon Townsville's North Queensland. But anyway, we'll call it North Queensland for Anzac Day, wreath-laying ceremony commemorating the contributions of our armed services, and at a forum again on Friday, the 26th of April, 6 p.m. West End Pub. Friday, the 26th of April, 6 p.m. West End Pub. So let's go straight to Craig. Now, Craig, I've got to tell you, he has been in the manufacturing business himself. He's part owner of that, as I understand it. I'll let him tell the details. But what impressed me when I first met Craig and he told me about his business and his dealings there was he knew the costs down to the cent and he understood the power costs. And Craig is always someone who has been on top of the power rubbish that's being fed our way. So he is well and truly a man who gets data. We mentioned that last week. He's against the climate scam. He's been exposing that very strongly, one of the few in Parliament that do that. And he understands the consequences of electricity. Welcome, Craig. Tell us about some of your 5 points, mate.
Yeah, great to be with you, Malcolm. And you probably don't confuse people there. 6 a.m. I know how you work in your work schedule. 6 a.m. could be a possibility. So make sure you correct that to 6 p.m., not 6 a.m. in the morning. Look, it's been a huge week. There's so many things happening over the last couple of days. But we are now starting to see the full consequences of this destructive insanity that is known as net zero. Only today, I mentioned this to you yesterday, I thought this company was in big trouble. Tritium, this is the company that makes electric car chargers that had a couple of hundred employees there in Brisbane. It was Anthony Albanese's poster child. We'd go there regularly. He would make big announcements there at the company. This is the future of manufacturing in Australia, and this is how we're going to create all these jobs with this low energy cost. Well, today, that company has gone into administration, which is very sad for all the people that work there, all the people that put their time and their heart and their soul in it going into administration. It's a tragic thing for that company to happen. But Malcolm, it's happened because of the energy costs in this country. Now, this company was planning to move. They were planning to relocate from Brisbane, so they'd already planned to close their Brisbane factory down. The one where Albanese said that this is the future, we must embrace it, the future is right here. Well, their plan to survive was to close that factory down and to relocate it to Tennessee in the USA. And the problem, Malcolm, is energy costs. Now, you can look up on the American websites. In Tennessee, the retail price of electricity is around 11 to 12 US cents. So a current exchange rate, if I'm correct, that's around about 16, 17 cents a kilowatt hour. The default market price in Queensland today is 50 Australian cents a kilowatt hour. So where the equivalent price is 17 US cents in Tennessee, in Queensland it's 50 cents. That's 3 times the price.
Yep.
How can anyone manufacturing anything in Queensland where you need energy possibly compete in those situations?
Well,
And
mate,
that's
before you went to Parliament, you were in the manufacturing business, and you knew all the costs. I'm told by experts, analysts, and also manufacturing business owners that today the cost of labour is not the number one cost category
right.
in manufacturing because of automation and mechanization. The number one cost category, the largest cost in manufacturing, is electricity and sometimes gas.
That's
So
exactly.
energy, that just backing up your point, energy is extremely important. Slight changes in energy price upwards and businesses go out of business.
Well, Malcolm, we used to have here before the year 2000, we had lower costs than the USA. We had some of the lowest energy costs in the world. And now we're double and triple what the USA is. So it's not this is not something that's happening all around the globe. This is something that is happening in Australia, where energy prices I think have increased faster in Australia
Yep.
over the last 2 decades than anywhere else in the world. And this is exactly the Labor and the Liberal Party's fault, because they have appeased this nonsense of net zero. They put all these subsidies in place for all this wind and all the solar, all subsidised. Without the subsidies involved, very people would install wind or solar farms. It's all about the subsidies. And that has white-handed our electricity grid and pushed prices through the roof. Like, to be paying 50 cents a kilowatt hour is an absolute nonsense. I can remember the last time I looked at the electricity cost for manufacturing, it was around 10 cents a kilowatt hour. And it's only going to get worse. This is where we are today. We saw, I think it was the CEO of Alinta only a couple of days ago down at the press club in Canberra, saying electricity prices and energy costs in this country are only going to increase more. Now, we as Australia we are really at the crossroads here. If we continue to go down the path that the Labor and Liberal Party are pushing, and we saw that in Queensland with Christopher Foley up there, the Liberal National Party in Queensland, signing up to, what is it, a net zero target of, what he wants 75% or something.
75%, Craig, 75%.
Or just close all the factories down, start slaughtering start slaughtering all the herds of cows. It is just those weak, gutless, coward policies from the Liberal Party.
Well, it's dishonest, Craig. It's plain ignorant. There's no factual basis. I've asked the agencies, CSIRO and Bureau of Meteorology, and many other agencies, including all the energy monitoring and the National Electricity Market. Not one of them can give me the fundamental basis for climate policy and energy policy. Not one. There is no understanding of that whatsoever. It's all baseless. It's a scam.
It is a total scam. You ask these people, set out your calculations of how you actually get to 75% reduction, which is a meaningless. It's a meaningless number. It's a meaningless target. It will have no effect whatsoever on global CO2 levels, let alone stop bad weather. It is just appeasement to the green left, and we've seen this from the Liberal Party time and time again. We need. I hope people in Queensland wake up to what's happening up there and come across to One Nation in droves, because that is the only way that we're going to save manufacturing in this country.
Craig, when I was a boy, we lived in central Queensland. Later on, we lived in Hunter Valley, and I went to high school, the first year high school in the Hunter Valley, then the rest in Queensland. And I used to cycle past the Curry Alcan smelter every day. Why did that smelter, from the world's largest aluminium sellers, manufacturers and sellers, why did that come to Curry? Because of Hunter Valley, high quality, cheap coal. Because of the electricity prices were the cheapest in the world. The electricity price for aluminium is very, very important because they use so much electricity, as you know. So I just want to make that point. So the other thing you raised yesterday, and by the way, Brickworks, which is a major brick manufacturer in this country, they had an interview of their CEO on Ross Greenwood's show on 2GB. I think about maybe 2019, something like that. And he was saying they were looking at going to the United States because they just could not put up with
True.
the electricity prices. And what's happened to electricity prices since then?
That's
They
gone
have
up.
skyrocketed, and Brickworks is looking to America as well. America.
Remember, energy costs are the most important foundation pillar of a strong economy. And we had Labor before the last election. Oh, we're going to make the energy prices lower. Telling us, you have Bowen, Albanese, Penny Wong, renewables are the cheapest. These people don't have a clue what they are doing. They seriously
They're
do not
lying,
understand.
Craig. They are lying.
They lie. Now, to lie, you have to have knowledge that you're lying. I just think these people are fools that have no understanding of how the electricity market works, or what's needed, or how manufacturing works. They've all been basically, in the Labor Party their entire lives. They've got no practical experience of making anything. Now, solar and wind, you've got a price in the intermittency, and you've got a price in the cost of hooking it up to the grid. You just can't price part of it.
Yeah.
And when you do, it is one of the most expensive forms of electricity. And the more solar and wind we pump into the grid, the higher our electricity prices are going to be. Just look at South Australia. Which state has the most so-called renewables in Australia? South Australia. Which state has the highest electricity prices? South Australia. South Australia actually has, it's 68 cents a kilowatt hour. That's the default market price. That is about the highest I've seen anywhere in the world. So
And what's happened?
that not only affects your manufacturing industries, it affects consumers, because it takes all the money out of consumers' pockets that should be spent elsewhere in the economy. So you're getting this double whammy, this harm on consumers, harm on manufacturing. And this is where both the Labor and Liberal Party are pushing us. It was a great...
Craig, I've seen graphs, of electricity prices versus the percentage of solar and wind. We're trying to get out of the habit of saying renewable because it's rubbish. The only thing renewable about solar and wind is that you have to renew the generators every 12, 15 years. That's
Yeah,
so as you increase the proportion of solar and wind along the x-axis, you increase the price of electricity.
that's
That
right.
is a fact. That is figures from all around the world. Countries that have got very high solar and wind have very high cost of electricity. That's just a fact. Can you tell us? We had a really interesting conversation yesterday. I can't remember all the points you mentioned about Quenos, the
Yeah.
plastics maker. That requires electricity, but tell us about not only about what happened with Quenos, because I've been watching that, and I thought it'd take longer to collapse, but it's gone. It's gone now.
Yeah.
Tell us what happened to Quenos and what that will mean for
Yeah.
people who used to use their products in other manufacturing sectors in this country downstream, and also tell us what happened, what will happen to their facilities, their real estate.
Well, Malcolm, this is another disaster for Australia. An Albanese or a Labor and Liberal disaster that's been coming for years. And Albanese has just accelerated the problem. This company manufactures they manufacture the base product for plastic in this country. So every plastic manufacturer, whether you manufacture plastic pipes, large water tanks, anything, the plastic packaging for our food, all that plastic the supply chain starts with this Kunos company. Now that company closing down, that means all these supply chains are now put in jeopardy. All those jobs along those supply chains in jeopardy. These companies are going to have to import the raw material, which will be a higher cost than what it was made locally because of the freight. And when they import the material, why not just import the finished plastic goods? So it's not just Kunos collapsing. There will be dozens of other companies that will close their doors or close their manufacturing down in Australia and bring in imported goods from overseas because of this. And again, why has this happened? Kunos is more an issue of gas rather than electricity. But again, we've got all these bans on gas onshore. All these bans on gas are pushing the energy costs up for these companies. So we just simply can't in this country. Again, the madness of net zero, the madness of the Greens. Domestic gas prices in this country are through the roof. And so manufacturers can't compete, so they close down. And the other issue with Kunos is interesting, Malcolm, what happened. This goes back to Albanese's turbo migration. So we've got all these mad net zero policies destroying the productivity of our nation. As our productivity declines, our real wealth falls, and we go backwards in GDP per capita. And we've had the last 3 quarters, GDP per capita has been negative in this country. So we are in a GDP per capita recession. But you traditionally measured The measurement of recession has traditionally been total GDP. That's the size of the economy, not GDP per capita. So to mask the disaster that's actually happening out there in the economy, Albanese is importing record numbers of people, unprecedented numbers of people into this country. We had sort of figures for February. The first time ever we had 100,000 in a month,
Yep.
and it was in February 2024. Net
That
migration.
an annual rate, that's 1.2 million arrivals. 1.2
Malcolm, we
million
used to
at
have
annual rate.
up until the year 2000, the annual rate averaged around 80,000 per year.
Yep.
Now we've had 100,000 in the month of February, which is
And
normally,
you're not knocking immigrants. My
course
father
not.
was an immigrant. You're not Immigrants
No,
have really built this country. There's no doubt
absolutely.
about that. But what we've got to have is a sensible number. 100,000 in February, as Craig just said, is bloody ludicrous.
But what that does, the reason Albanese is doing this, is it because it masks the decline in GDP per capita. So Albanese goes, oh, look how clever I am. Look how the economy is growing. Look at all these jobs I've created. When all he's doing, and what this has so many unintended consequences, Malcolm. That's what we're seeing now. We've seen the unintended consequences of rents going through the roof. We've seen it there in Brisbane. A tent city going up in Brisbane because there's simply not enough houses. You can't simply build
No, Craig,
enough
tent cities, mate. Cities.
tent,
They're in Ipswich. They're in
tent
Logan. They're
cities.
in Scenic Rim. They're in Brisbane itself. There are several within walking distance of where I am right now.
It's tragic that you would think Australians are having been forced to live in tents because of the direct policies of the Labor and Liberal parties. But that is what happened today. So that's one of the unintended consequences. But one of the
And
other,
the man coming back to the man just briefly, Craig, the man who ramped up immigration was John Howard.
that's right.
He took it from 800 to over
That's
200,000, I think. But
that's right.
and then
It makes
Albanese's
it
put on
look
steroids.
good. Yeah, it makes you look good because the overall size of the economy is getting bigger. If you want the overall size of the economy to get bigger, just go and have we annex Papua New Guinea and bring their economy into Australia.
Yep.
That's the equivalent of what we are doing. But it sets off all these unintended consequences, and one of them, of course, man, we've seen rents and house price inflation, but there's also land price inflation. So where you see a manufacturer like Kunos that had tens, maybe hundreds of millions of dollars of sunk cost in their plant, and they think we need to hang on. If we close down, we've got to write the plant down to nothing. So it's worthwhile us hanging on and continue manufacturing. But what we saw with Kunos, the land that they had increased in value so much, inflation in land prices, that property developers came along and said, we'll make you an offer for that land. And these manufacturing companies go, hang on, there's cash on the table. Let's take that developer's cash. Let's scrap our plant and run for the hills and close down these manufacturing jobs. That is what is happening. That is what has happened with Kunos. That is the reason they decided to get out and close everything down. So what we're going to see, a manufacturing plant adding wealth, creating wealth in this country, employing people, even though it was operating at a loss, is now going to be scrapped. So we're going to be destroying the productive assets of this nation that create our wealth. This is what is happening today. Our country is falling apart before our very eyes. It's
Yeah,
absolute tragedy.
yes. Yesterday, I was up at the Sunshine Coast listening to three different groups of people in the mid-central coast, mid-Sunshine Coast, and the northern Sunshine Coast, and just north near Noosa, Doonan. Three marvelous groups, mate. They are so well prepared. They know what they're doing. But their biggest fight is with the local council, as it was led under the previous mayor in Sunshine Coast. That was Jamison, I think it was. They have got some horror stories there. Some of the things that have been done, just horrific. But one of the farmers I won't get into it too much, but at the moment, but they basically the Sunshine Coast Council had adopted the Carbon Blue and the Carbon Heart programs. The carbon sequestration, mate. So the climate scam is coming at us from every direction. I won't get into that in detail now. I just want to compliment them and the other group that we met at Koana Save Beaches campaign. But the sugarcane growers, their farmlands are going to be sterilised because of the the actions of the council without permission. They interfered in the farming process and caused salt water to inundate their crops. The Sunshine Coast sugar growers used to take their cane and raw cane and put it into a mill that was owned by Belgians.
Yes.
That
Yes.
was shut down recently, and the land sold for $100 million. The mill came in and was bought by the Belgians for
Right.
12 million, so the figure says, and was sold at $100 million for real estate. So the sugarcane growers around Sunshine Coast have to then truck it up to Maryborough. Well, that mill apparently is owned by a Malaysian, and I can't remember whether they said it's been sold or is about to be sold for real estate again, and they bought it much less than this, but they're going to sell it for 100 million. So we're shutting down because of carbon farming and carbon bullshit. We're shutting down our farms, shutting down our productive manufacturing assets, and getting into real estate and coffee businesses.
Malcolm, you can't run an economy, on baristas. As much as I love my coffee, made in one of the shops, and all those hard-working people that own those coffee shops, my hat goes off to them. But you've got to have, at the end of the day, to have an economy, you've got to have people creating real wealth. And that is your miners, that is your farmers, and that is your manufacturers. And we have the Albanese government, along with the Liberal Party, have declared war on those sectors with this net zero. And we are seeing the unintended consequences. So the net zero makes the place less productive, and then Albanese tries to patch over that with huge rates of migration, and then you have all these unintended consequences. And we saw another one today with the report on the hospitals. I don't know if you've seen that come out today.
No.
Our hospitals actually, I've got it here. The hospitals waiting times have blown out to the worst on record. It is
this Australia or New South Wales?
This is Australia-wide, Malcolm. This is what's happened. Our hospitals, this is from the Australian. I'll just read this out if people haven't seen it. The performance of public hospitals has deteriorated to its lowest level ever, with planned surgery wait times now the longest on record, and emergency departments failing to treat on time as many as 1 in 3 people with life-threatening conditions. Now, why would that be happening in public hospitals? Is it any wonder when you've got 100,000 new people coming in 1 month that all need those services, that all need to join the queues for the hospitals, and that is happening month after month after month?
And sacking good nursing staff and doctors if they didn't get an untested injection.
It is a tragedy what's going on. Basically, the best advice to some of those, don't get sick, because if you go to a public hospital, there'll be thousands of people in the queue in front of you, and every time Albanese imports thousands and hundreds of thousands of more people, those queues only get longer. It's not only our housing that can't keep up with the rate of migration, it's our public hospitals, and we've seen it in that report today. And the real people are suffering are the low income earners of this country, the people that rely on public hospitals and are just pushed back further and further back in the queue, in the waiting list queue. And you can tie all this back to the madness of net zero.
Well, most of it, mate. You can also tie some of it back to the madness of the COVID deceit, because we've got ambulance ramping problems in this state. They've admitted it now. The figures are making it very, very clear. There aren't any beds, which you've just confirmed. But we've got a shortage of staff because they've been suspended or let go because they refused to take an injection that was not tested in this country at all, and is now causing lots of deaths. So we've got that. We've also got shortage of staff, and Craig, I've got to make sure that people understand the problem with the hospitals, the problem with the ambulances are not the staff. They're doing the best they can. They are fighting really hard to do the best they can. They're under incredible stress because of some of their mates have not come back to work because they've been mandated out due to government decisions, mandates, orders, directions, whatever you want to call them. And now they've got the system. W. Edwards Deming, the famous management consultant, a wonderful guy, he said that 85% of the problems that you see in businesses and organizations are due to the systems, not the people. Later on, as he got closer to his about 95 years of age, he said that the amount is probably 95%. So it's not the people that are at fault. It's the bloody bureaucrats and the politicians that are telling lies in this country and
Look,
causing, as you said, increases in electricity
those
charges based
those
on lies.
a lot of those nurses that we have in our public hospitals are wonderful, wonderful people doing an amazing job. But how they must cope every single day when they go to work and they're trying to clear the backlog. And as soon as they lift their head up, the queue out the door waiting for services is longer and longer. Malcolm, these unintended consequences of this Ponzi scheme of migration are crippling this nation. And it is the Albanese government. And remember, the Liberals are no different. The Liberals still believe in this idea of this big Australia. The Greens won't even discuss migration.
They won't even debate me, mate. I've challenged them to debate 20 times. They won't debate me.
This is this woke, weak mind virus that is also destroying our country. Now, seriously, in a sensible country, you look at, okay, there's an issue, we've got a problem with migration. Let's have a debate about migration. What should the levels of migration be? That would be what a sensible country would have. But what we've got so many woke, politically correct people running around the place. Oh no, migration. We can't even talk about that because
You're a
we're
racist.
racist. We can't even talk about it. So meanwhile, you've got all these problems happening. You've got these politicians in Greens that won't even discuss or sit down and debate solutions to the problem. I said, Malcolm, we are in a very, very bad state in this country.
Some time ago, I was invited to, I think it was a year or 2 years ago, I was invited to give a speech in Canada by Zoom, unfortunately. I didn't have the pleasure of going there because lovely country, Canada, great people. But a speech showing the realities on climate. Climate is varying naturally. There's no change going on in climate whatsoever. And human carbon dioxide has no impact on the environment at all because the level of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere is controlled entirely 100% by nature. We can go into that one day. That's what the empirical scientific evidence proves. But they asked me to give a presentation, and I showed the scam, and they introduced me to a man called to the name of Pierre Poilievre, who's now
Yes,
the opposition leader. I don't know the party he's in, but because
the
they've got
Canadian
three different
Conservative
parties.
Party. It is. He's
Thank
Canadian
you.
Conservative.
Tell us about him, because apparently the
Well,
under 30s you were telling us yesterday in Canada are now starting to wake up well and truly.
well, Malcolm, this is also something amazing that I saw this week. Now, it's traditionally been accepted that the under 30s are strong voters of Greens and the Labor Party because they go into school. We know that the education department, the education systems have been hijacked by extremists from the left and are filling kids' heads with all this nonsense about climate change, the world's going to end, all this sustainability rubbish. We saw Gillard wreck the national curriculum with her cross-curriculum priorities. So the kids come out of school brainwashed in this climate thing. Like, oh yeah, the Greens are the way to go. The Greens are going to save the planet. Right? And that's traditionally how it's been. But what's happened in Canada recently? In under 30s in Canada, the Conservative Party is now the party of choice for under 30 Canadians. And I believe this is a trend that we will see more and more of. Now, you think about why would young people flock to the Conservative parties, being the most popular party for under 30s in Canada? Well, you look at what's happened. Uh, all these major parties, especially from the left, all support this high rates of migration. So it's young people that are more likely to be renters that bear the brunt more than anyone else. It is young people that bear the brunt that are trying to get into the housing market, that just see house price inflation take off. Now, if you own a house, if you bought a house 20, 30 years ago, that's fantastic. You know, you're an older person or middle age, and you're seeing your house price go up. It doesn't really benefit you. It's a false economy. But for a young person, you are being squeezed out of those things. So you see all these things, and always then you go to net zero. Now, one of the things that many young Australians like to do is travel. They love to travel overseas. That broadens your horizons. That gives you a deeper life, a greater life experiences. And Australians have traditionally loved to travel overseas. But under net zero, the policy is you've got to reduce your emissions from airfares, so you've got to reduce the number of flights. So that means carbon taxes on air travel and reducing the number of flights.
But
So
when
that
you
again,
reduce the number of flights, mate, you're going to increase the cost overall of traveling because there's less
of
revenue coming in.
course you are. Look, that's their plan. That is the globalist plan. That is under net zero, you basically can't have any international flights, and you've got to. And on the road to net zero, you've got to significantly reduce the amount of that people fly. Now, that might be okay in a country like Europe where you can jump on a train going between cities of, short distances of a couple of million, 10 million people each. But in Australia, where we're tucked down the bottom of the globe, and to go anywhere, you've got to jump on a plane to get out of the country, or even to fly in parts of Queensland. I was speaking to you the other week. Like, it's really to get across Queensland. The only practical way is to jump in a plane. The distances are just far too great to drive, or the possibility to have some sort of like electric trains or something. Just a nonsense. So it's going
Well,
to be the young people again suffering under these net zero policies more than anyone else.
exactly. And last week in the Weekend Australian, I read an article where they're saying that there are fewer people getting married now. I think it's under well and truly under 40. I think it
Oh,
was around
oh,
30 something percent. And the reason they're doing that, Craig, is because when people get married, they like to have a decent ceremony. Well, they're saving that money from having the ceremony.
yeah.
It's a conscious choice so they can put it into their home deposit because they're desperately trying to
Mm,
scratch up money for home deposit. So the young are getting smashed with higher costs. They're getting smashed with higher house prices and higher rentals. Getting smashed with not being able to get married legally, and they're being smashed with lack of less travel going or more expensive travel going overseas. What happened to the Australian dream for young people?
right.
It's
Look,
getting
the
smashed.
Labor and Liberal Party combined have destroyed the Australian dream of home ownership for a generation of young Australians. Young Australians should be very angry about what the Liberal and Labor Party and the Greens have done to them. That's why we're seeing this great reversal in Canada. And I predict that will happen in Australia, where young people will realise the party that naturally aligns to them and is more aligned to their needs is actually One Nation.
Yep.
And I think you'll see, Malcolm, in the years to come, more and more young people signing up and joining One Nation because they will realise that is the party that best represents their interest.
So thank you for that. Was there anything else you want to raise? Because I'd like to get on
I
to
just like to add
a
just one other
question.
thing. You talked about marriage. The other huge unintended consequence of this Albanese's policies is our fertility rate in this country is crashing.
Oh yes, you raised that yesterday. Tell us
Now,
about that. That was a
now
stunning
you
figures.
need a fertility rate of over 2, so that's how many women on average, how many children each female in the country has. Now, some
I think
women
it's
we know,
over 2.3, isn't it, to
yeah,
just maintain your
you
numbers?
need about you need over 2 to maintain your population. Right now, we know that some women can't have children, and there's IVF and there's things like that. We try to help those people with the long run. But what has happened? Our fertility rate has crashed. The last numbers from the Australian Bureau of Statistics, which were for the financial year 2022-23, so we're still close to a year behind on this data, show that it collapsed to 1.58. Now, that
1.58, under
one,
1.6.
under 1.6, we had the last year was the biggest collapse on record. Now, you can speculate on the reasons for that. We know that there might be something to do with these COVID injections and COVID lockdowns. But the
There
main reason
definitely
I
is,
believe,
according to some figures from obstetricians and
you know,
gynecologists. There's
the
definitely a
one of the
decreased
main reasons, Malcolm, is the
birth rate.
cost of living. This
Yep.
madness of net zero pushing up the cost of living, and also this madness of telling women, oh, you don't have children and the war's going to end. This madness all combined. Now, at 1.58, in a couple of generations, we go extinct as a race of people. We are breeding ourselves as Australians into extinction.
Gee.
At 1.58, and that's assuming you can even keep it at 1.58, in 3 generations, your population halves. And you have to replace it with migrants coming from overseas. This is a catastrophic disaster for this nation at 1.58. It is the consequence of the policies of the Labor and Liberal Party. This is more of these unintended consequences that's destroying our country, and we've got to focus everything we can, all the policies that we can, to try and get that rate, that fertility rate, up, heading in the other direction, and back up to over 2. Otherwise, Mr. Malcolm, we're going to go extinct as a race of people.
Right. And along the way to extinction will be controlled if the digital identity comes in, Craig. So I just want to mention a question here, because we have a fabulous team in our office, and they took a question here. You're asking us, someone said, you're asking us to sign a digital petition, but you don't want to, opposing the digital identity. What's the difference? Well, there's
There's
a
a
huge
huge,
difference. The
huge difference.
digital identity is a
Yes.
huge database with everything in it about you, your biometric data, identity verification, and every one of these factors the Liberal Nationals introduced.
That's
Digital
right.
identity, the LNP introduced. Misinformation, disinformation, the LNP introduced. The new payments platform, it was introduced by the Reserve Bank under the governance of the Liberals. The digital currency, the Reserve Bank is working on that. They've told me in answer to questions and Senate estimates under what introduced the work being done under the Liberal Nationals. Cash ban that we defeated, the banks cutting branches and ATMs, directors' identity saw a massive widening of the scope beyond legislation and regulations.
Right.
They didn't. The director's identity was supposed to be very, very simple and worth doing, but they illegally widened the scope without telling anyone. So what we've got here is an e-petition, which illustrates the convenience of electronic use, digital use, using digital, because what that means is very much simpler to join a petition and do some transactions and get information. But in addition to making it easier, you've got other aspects of digital life which are which are trying to bring people under control. That's the difference. E-petition, you can do it or not do it. That's up to you. It's not compulsory. It's voluntary and helps you if you so choose. With the digital identity, it is number plating every one of us for control. It'll be compulsory for getting services from the government. That's the difference. That's why we want you to use e-petition or a paper petition, whatever you want, in opposing the digital identity bill. That's the difference. I hope that's explained. Is that clear to you, Craig?
Yeah, Malcolm, there's also another couple of important points. That digital identity bill before the Parliament at the moment says it's passed the Senate, not the House of Reps, so this can still be defeated.
Yes.
Actually enables private companies to access this government database of digital identity. Right, a huge turnaround. Also, to
Craig, without the privacy precautions
correct.
that the government said that they would be, trust us, we're going to bring them in the future,
That's
like hell.
right. This will be made compulsory, by default, or however they'll make it compulsory, and it is one of the key little mechanisms that you need to bring in a central bank digital currency. You can't have an effective central bank digital currency without a digital ID, and then it sets it also up for down the track for biometric data, to be a facial recognition data.
That's here, Craig. The Labor
Database.
Party introduced that bill. The research preliminary reading was done by the Liberal Party under Morrison, but the Labor Party introduced it, and it went through the Senate. We opposed it.
But Malcolm, it is heading towards every single day. Our country more and more resembles, the novel 1984 that I read in high school than the Australia that I grew up in high school with. Bigger government control, wanting to control our movements, what we do, what we say. We've seen this e-safety commissioner imported from America, completely and utterly out of control.
Craig.
It is Malcolm. It is just appalling to think. She's around there saying, she says something like, which wants to control the way the Australians hear things. And what they want to do, they wanted to censor. They don't. This is the mis and disinformation bill is bad enough as it is, right? And the government says, "Oh, we deem this as misinformation, therefore we are censoring." They want to take that further. They want to be able to censor facts and real life that is happening if they deem, this might be offensive, or people might not like that, people might get upset. They want to be able to censor that as well. Malcolm, as I said, we are in. I don't think many people understand how bad and desperate the situation in this country is. And
There's something I've got to share with everyone about the e-safety commissioner, who's an American, as Craig's rightly said. I asked her questions in Senate estimates last time. She was not ready for them, and she's clearly, in my opinion, her behavior shows she's used to having the floor and just having no accountability. I asked her some questions, and she was floundering. But we asked a question under Senate on notice, and we got the cost of her visit to Davos, the World Economic Forum Gabfest, where
What
she
was
was
that?
working with three other
Oh,
countries to come up with a protocol for controlling speech and online. $40,000 for that woman plus one member of staff from the e-safety office to go to Davos. $40,000 to
yeah.
work out how to
They,
censor us. That's what they're
they,
doing.
they live in another world, Malcolm. Look, one thing I think we need to do is not only ban politicians from going to Davos, we should ban any government public service going there. And I'd also take it further. We can't stop people if they want to go there in their private capacity, but we don't have to give them a business tax deduction for it. So if you want to go to Davos, you're more than welcome. We're not going to stop you, but don't expect to get a tax deduction for it if you're a business. And Australian public services won't. The taxpayer won't be paying public service to go there. And when you saw, there's a video of that woman there, and she's asked the question, "Well, hang on, what about all this online speech? How does that equate with the First Amendment?" And she goes, "Oh, the First Amendment is not applicable in Australia. I don't have to worry about that."
Human rights are not applicable either, I presume.
Yeah.
What a clown. But Avi Yemeni said that he would invite me to go with him to on a reporting basis. I'm not going to attend the Grub Fest at Davos, but
Yes, yes.
to help him report and interview people. And I'd love to do that. So I'm thinking about that. So we just got to sort out a time. The other thing, no, that's about it for Davos. Let's get on to questions and answers for anything for Craig or myself. Anybody got any questions? What's both your opinion on nuclear energy? My opinion is whatever energy we decide should be the cheapest. That's it. That's it. Now, in some areas, so that's the first point I'd answer. The second thing is that I'd say we need to discuss nuclear. I'm open to nuclear. Nuclear is a very, very safe and effective. So, gee, you don't say those things as politicians, but it's very, very safe and effective means of generating electricity. It's not as cheap as coal yet, but South Australia, it may be the cheapest because they have to transport their coal into South Australia. But New South Wales, Queensland, Victoria, Western Australia, coal or gas far cheaper. But yes, we need to debate nuclear. It's very reliable, very safe, very effective, and yes, I'm yes with nuclear.
A couple of things, Malcolm. I talked about that tritium country wanting to move to Tennessee because of the lower energy costs in Tennessee. A third of Australia's. Tennessee gets about 40% of their energy from nuclear power. So we've
Yeah.
got Bowen running around saying, "Oh, it's too expensive, it's too expensive, da, 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 da," right? Tennessee, where electricity prices are a third of what they are in Queensland and a quarter of what they are in South Australia, gets 40% of their electricity from nuclear power. So how does that work, right? So I think I was the old member for Hughes, and I was the only member of Parliament with a nuclear
Yeah.
reactor in his electorate. Right? It was a research reactor down there at Lucas Heights, not for electricity generation. So I've had long talks with the people at Ansto down there. And what we need to do, we need to be investing. I think I wouldn't be investing in building a nuclear power station at the moment because coal is cheaper in our nation. That is our natural advantage. That's one of the reasons why we're one of the few industrial nations without nuclear power, is because we've got that magnificent black coal seam that runs down our eastern seaboard. We've got that brown coal down there in the Latrobe Valley in Victoria, which gave us the lowest electricity prices in the world until we went mad as a nation. What I would do with nuclear power is it's no good just being the biggest exporter of uranium. We need to own the technology. Right? We should be investing in developing nuclear technology. We should be rather than all these harebrained scrims. Albanese putting $1 billion into building a factory to make solar panels somewhere, which we have no competitive advantage over. We never will. It's a market that is completely flooded, has excess capacity in the manufacturing sector. Right? That money instead should have been put into investment into nuclear research. Right?
Yes.
We should be investing. It should be Australia that should be trying to develop these new small nuclear reactors. Now, the reactor down in Lucas Heights in my electorate, have a guess which country we went to have to get that built? It was
France.
Argentina. Argentina.
Argentina.
Argentina had the technology to build that we didn't have here in Australia. So it's no point just exporting, I said, the uranium. The investments that we should be making in our country are in research, study. We should have the old CEO of ANSTO said to me, look, he said, we should be building a nuclear university that we can study all these things. He said, but the first thing you have to do, he says, so you are taken seriously by the world, is get rid of this ridiculous ban that we have on a prohibition on nuclear power in this country. Bowen doesn't want to get rid of it. He just keeps it there. If he thinks nuclear power is so expensive, why even have the ban? Right? Get rid of that ban. Send a message to the world that Australia is serious about nuclear. Then we attract some of the best researchers, and we try and own the technology and be the best, not only in the natural resource, but the technology as well. But in the meantime, even if you decided that you wanted to build a nuclear reactor tomorrow, you'd have to find the site, go through all the approvals. The reality is, you'd have to get it through Parliament. The reality is, it'd be 15 years at least. We don't
but
have
mainly
that time.
mainly for the admin, mainly for the
Yes.
administration and the approvals, Craig, because building a nuclear power station doesn't take anything like 15 years.
Yeah, the approvals, but that is the reality of the situation.
Yeah.
In fact, we don't have that time in Australia. We've got these aging coal-fired power stations. We need to be refurbishing those coal-fired power stations now to extend their life. We need to be building new coal-fired power stations now that can come online in a couple of years. We need to be doing that now because we don't have the luxury. The closures that we've had of coal-fired power stations, we don't have the luxury to wait until the nuclear technology comes and we can actually get stuff built. They need to be done today. And then down the track, let's invest. And as nuclear comes online, it can become cheaper and cheaper than our coal. Then let's use it.
Craig, just before we go to the next question, just a small point of fact on coal-fired power. Coal-fired power used to be the cheapest in this. Well, it was the cheapest in Australia. It still is the cheapest by far in Australia, other than hydro. But we've got very limited hydro. So hydro's the cheapest. Coal's next cheapest. The next cheapest would be nuclear. Solar and wind are not even close. Warren Buffett, the best investor the world's ever seen, famous for his discipline on investment, said wind turbines, hopeless investment. Subsidized wind turbines, marvelous investment. So South Australia has gone to wind and solar, and they're a basket case. And the highest prices in
economic
Australia.
Basket case.
And yet they have their coal deposits are pretty dirty coal. They're low calorific value, low energy content, but they've got some of the world's best uranium deposits. South Australia would be an ideal place for uranium.
Absolutely.
So let's keep going with questions. Mandy Smith, can you read that, Craig?
Yeah, we couldn't wait to get rid of Morrison. Now we need to get rid of Albo. But who do we have to run this country of the people? Well, I'll tell you, there was a thing. How about Prime Minister Pauline Hanson?
Yes.
Right? There is someone that you will know that will be making decisions for the best interest of the country rather than what is popular tomorrow.
I'll vouch for that. I've worked with her daily in Canberra. She's a marvelous leader.
She doesn't care. She just says what is best for our nation and doesn't care about short-term popularity. And that has cost her dearly. But that was Morrison's biggest mistake. Morrison was always chasing the short-term popularity, never standing and fighting on the principles that the so-called Liberal
principles. The man doesn't have any principles, from what I can see.
Used to believe in, and when you do that, you end up standing for nothing and you end up getting kicked out. We know what Albanese stands for. Albanese is a hardcore socialist. His policies are to have the government control everything, to have the government control investments. This mad scheme he's got. He's going to butcher billions of dollars, tens of billions, hundreds of billions of taxpayers' money on these mad investment schemes that he's going on. Have a look at the magnificent, if you haven't seen it, the magnificent cartoon that was it the One Nation cartoons that was put up this morning about
we did.
What do we have unlimited supplies of? Our taxpayers' money. It is one of their best. It is just so clever on so many levels. If you haven't seen it, it's a must watch.
I've got an idea for you, Craig. Just I'd like your feedback on it while we're waiting for the next question. We have pediatric hospitals because children have specific particular needs. Okay, we understand that.
Yes.
Now, another group that have specific particular needs are seniors. It's well known, geriatric care. We don't have any seniors hospitals, but we have pediatric hospitals. A constituent up here in Queensland has been very strongly supporting me, and he's been saying we need a seniors hospital. So that's going into our state. Our party thinks it's a marvelous idea. It's going to be adopted. It has been adopted as our state platform in healthcare. What do you think about a seniors hospital?
Well, Malcolm, firstly, we need to make sure we're keeping up the hospitals with the population that we've got. It'd be great to have these specialised hospitals on the way, but at the moment we can't even keep up with the population. You saw that data released today. We have waiting lists longer than any time in our nation's history because of this mad Ponzi scheme of migration. Bringing people into the country without building enough. What we built, we brought in over 1 million people. Albanese's brought in since he's come to government. Where's the hospitals for an extra million people? We're not building them. It's just look. I just get so frustrated. I just see this complete disaster that is unfolding before our eyes, and you've got so many people sleepwalking into it. You've got media commentators that won't do their job, that won't tackle the hard issues. You've got a weak, gutless Liberal Party. What you saw of that Christopher in Queensland, rolling over on that net zero, to not stand up against that and push back against that. So
they didn't stand up for the voice. They didn't stand up for the voice, and we told them not only how to oppose the voice referendum, but also to avoid what was the other thing? The treaty. They signed up for a bloody treaty. They wanted to, and then when they saw the voice was so badly rejected, they then pulled out of the treaty. But we were there all along, right from the start. Christopher just follows whatever he thinks the media will want to report him well for. That's it. No principles.
What did one of Churchill's great sayings? He said, "Nations that go down fighting live to rise again, but those that go down appeasing everything are basically squashed into the dust of history." And that is what we are seeing at the Liberal Party. They will not fight. They will not stand up for their principles. And that decision of Christopher to roll over and support the Greens on net zero. And look, if you're in Queensland, why bother voting for the Liberal Party? If just go and vote for the Greens or the Labor Party, they're going to give you this. Liberals are going to give you the same policies.
Well, that's what happened with the Teals, mate.
I hope just people can wake up enough before that election and realise that is one nation is the true opposition in this nation, not only in federally but also in Queensland, that is standing up to give people policies that will have a chance of saving this nation.
Here's Unsound Engineers saying, I really think FON can get that's Pauline Hanson's One Nation, can get the balance of power next election. Mate, we already influence, with just 2 senators in federal parliament,
right.
We already influence way beyond our numbers the politics in this country. We're the ones who raised immigration. We're the ones who raised housing prices.
Right.
And the Liberals have just barely jumped on board because they can see that it's a serious issue, but they won't talk much about it. And the Labor Party, Craig, look at the bloody Labor Party's response to it. When they realized we were putting so much heat on them and it was starting to get into the media because of our work, the Labor Party said, oh, we're going to cut back on immigration. Well, they haven't.
That's right.
100,000 coming in February.
They pushed the accelerator button down again.
But their response is lies. That's Labor's response is lies. They don't like doing anything. Look at the treasury we've got. Any more questions out there?
Malcolm, why don't I bring up just on a digital ID?
A live raptor says digital ID is a tyranny. Yeah. Exactly.
We've got these rallies coming up.
Thank you.
5th of May in every capital city. I know we're just in negotiations now with the police. I think the exact locations where they will be. But Sunday, the 5th of May, please put that in your calendar.
11 a.m. 11 a.m.
If you ever want to protest against something in this country, come out and protest against digital ID. Because if this goes through, followed by the central bank digital currency and the mis and disinformation bill, you may not get a chance to protest against anything ever again. That's how
because part of the digital identity, as Craig's alluding to, will capture social media. And if your social media comments, and if you make comments in public that go against the government narrative, then you'll be striped down, and you'll lose some of your entitlements. You know, the government's misinformation, disinformation bill, that looks like it's been shelved for a little while. And why? Because we put up such a fuss about the misinformation, disinformation.
Remember
Our
that
party
again.
ran a conference in Brisbane about it. We stirred the pot on that one, and the Labor Party's pulled its horns in a little bit. We've done the same in the digital identity. It looks like Labor may be not. Well, they haven't listed it for entry into the House of Reps, Craig, for May. So that's a welcome sign, but let's see what they do. But it's not over. We have got to come out to this rally,
That's right.
nationwide rally, and protest, and also contact your local federal member of Parliament, and try to get a conversation, try to visit his office or her office, and failing that, write a paper letter. Tell
Some,
them to stick their digital identity bill.
some people say, "Oh, what's the point of protesting? What's the point of protesting?" Well, with this digital identity bill, there is a real point, because yes, Labor have done this tricky, dirty trick, putting it through the Senate first, but it still hasn't passed the House of Reps.
Correct.
So if there's enough people that turn out, right? People just sit at home on your backside. The Albanese would say, "Ha ha ha! I can get away with this as well." But if we can get enough people turning out at those rallies, and we can raise enough protest about it, we know, as Albanese is like to pull his head in and pull back on that digital ID bill.
Craig, we had a victory when the cash ban bill was introduced, which would have cut the payments of cash, eliminated the payments of cash above $10,000, which would easily be amended in future years to anything over 2,000, then over 200, then eliminate cash altogether, and you got a digital currency.
Yeah.
They introduced that in the Morrison government, and the Labor Party pushed it through the House of Representatives together. We got hold of the crossbench in the Senate. We got hold of the Greens. We told them how bad it was. We started putting pressure on Labor. But above all, what we did was some of our staff contacted the grassroots members of the Labor Party and the grassroots members of the Liberal Party. They put so much heat on their Labor senators and Liberal senators that was sent to a committee, and it stayed there for months. And I moved a motion to get rid of it off the Senate list. And our motion got up, Craig.
Yeah.
So that's what happens when the people exercise their power. That's what happens. So please turn up on May the 5th, capital cities around Australia, 11 a.m., and have your say. And we've got some fabulous speakers lined up in each of the capital cities. Some of them have got wonderful bands lined up as well. So come along and voice your opinion. But above all, voice your opinion directly to Labor and Liberal members of Parliament who are supposed to be representing your wishes. Tell them you're paying their wages. Tell them they're supposed to listen to you and speak up for what you say. Tell them what you want them to say.
You're right. These protests, just look at some of those COVID protests. Now, people think, "Oh, they didn't achieve much." Well, I'll tell you, they did.
They did.
Right? It was those protests that made those state governments wind back the lockdowns. The lockdowns ended because of those COVID protests. Right? The craziness of those outdoor mask bans ended because of those COVID protests. And remember, so Greg Hunt had ordered 10 doses for every man, woman, and child in this country. Those vaccine passports or vaccine certificates were meant to go on indefinitely. So today, you couldn't go into a pub or a cafe without showing your vaccine passport, which I think you'd need to be up to about your 7th injection to be valid. Those vaccine passports were basically tossed in the bin for a while in this country because of people getting out and rallying and supporting. We can do the same thing on the digital ID. That's
exactly.
why everyone, please get out there, I says, and get out in the protest. If you haven't been before, these are peaceful protests. You'll meet a lot of great people and friends that you haven't done. So I'd encourage everyone, come along to one of those protests Sunday, the 5th of May.
Yep, and I just want to point out I listen to Topher Field. I rarely listen to watch videos, but sometimes when I drive, I listen to the videos. Topher Field was on with Dr. John Campbell for an hour and 17 minutes, and I listened to him driving today. And Topher, I have to compliment Topher, and he's got a really good take-home point. During the COVID COVID mandates, during the COVID restrictions, the lockdowns in particular, in Victoria, the most savage in the world, when they first met to protest, 30 people.
That's right.
That grew over the weeks to 400 people. That grew to 1,000.
That's right.
That grew to tens of thousands. That grew to 100,000, and Andrew stopped the lockdowns.
Now,
That's what happens.
yeah, it was. I was down at that protest in Melbourne, speaking on the steps of the Parliament House. I have never seen a crowd like that. The media played it down. The crowd went hundreds of metres down Burke Street. It went hundreds of metres to the left and right. You could see the comparisons of the aerial photographs with the protests against the Vietnam. And that was Australia's biggest ever political protest. That had an effect.
It certainly did.
The media don't report it, and the media covered it all up. But the politicians that were making the decisions and trying to keep themselves popular and in power, they saw the weight of numbers at that protest, and that influenced policy.
Did you attend the big Canberra protest, Craig?
I did, Malcolm. Yes, he was down there as well.
And I look back at one point when we were approaching Parliament House, going up the hill, and it looked like kilometres of crowd.
Yes, yep, it was. I
10,
think that
20 wide, just
yeah,
kilometres.
the Canberra one was huge. I think the Melbourne one was probably the biggest. We also had massive protests in Sydney as well. I can remember the protest in Sydney. The march went from Hyde Park, to those that know it. I think it's down Market Street, down past David Jones, down past the town hall, turns up around York Street and comes back, right? A couple of kilometres. The first marchers had returned before the last marchers had left the park. That's how long it was. That's absolutely true. I was at the very back of the march. I think if I keep at the back, I'm going to miss it. So I said the first marchers were coming back, and we were still in the park talking, and the last marchers hadn't left. But let's hope we can see. We may not get crowds, but let's hope we can get big crowds out at these digital ID rallies, because these rallies have effect with the politicians.
Yep. Providing they're big, they have a huge effect. Thank you very much, everyone, for listening in, and we'll hopefully see you next week. And thank you, Craig, on very short notice. Thanks for the phone call yesterday. They were really solid points.
Yeah, it's good.
Thanks
So
for
we keep
jumping in, mate.
those discussions and bounce ideas off each other. That's what makes good policy overall.
Yep. Honest policy. Thanks, Craig. Thank you, everyone.
Thanks, Malcolm. Thanks, everyone.